Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ash here coming at you today in Clash Royale with a very special guest. It's Hazard, the man himself, back on the channel. Haz, how you doing, man?
Dude, I'm good, Ash. How are you doing?
I am doing fantastic, man. It has been quite a while since I've had you on the channel. I'm happy to have you back.
Yeah, no, it's great to be back.
How's the stream going? How's life?
Stream's been going pretty well. I've been a little bit on pause due to some medical stuff, but I should be back up and running soon with all that.
Good, man. I'm glad you're getting better. Hope to see your notification pop up on my phone a little bit more often, dude.
Yeah.
Well, the reason we have you on today is to talk about this HOG PEKKA deck. You are known as one of the best HOG players, especially on ladder in the entire game. I figured who better to bring on the channel to dissect this deck than you. You've been playing a lot of this deck. So before we get into the replays and stuff like that, we have a nice, healthy variety of meta decks that we'll be facing today. I want you to tell me a little bit about the deck, because this is really Hog Lightning at its core, but it's been adjusted. You know, there's no more Executioner Tornado. Instead, there's a Pekka, an Ewiz, and Bats. Talk a little bit about why this Hog deck suits the current meta so well.
Well, there are a lot of like tanks in the meta, especially like Giant, Golem, you know, Pekkas are everywhere as well with Pekka Minor Poison. So the Pekka really does well against that, which makes a lot of sense. Pekka is a really strong card. It's been in the meta for a good while, but it seems to just have gotten stronger and stronger as other things have been nerfed over time, like Graveyard and things like that. But I feel like the Ewiz and the Bats also pair really well with it. The Ewiz is good against other Pekkas and other troops. Like as the Pekka, it only shoots ground, so the Ewiz is a very good control for most air troops behind most tanks, and the Bats just really pair along with that Ewiz well.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point about the Pekka. And hey, man, you know, the Mega Knight is coming. I feel bad for the Mega Knight because I feel like Pekka is gonna like enter into the meta where Pekka is like one of the most popular cards, and she's gonna dominate against him. Do you feel the same way, or?
Well, I haven't seen Mega Knight gameplay as you have, but I feel, yeah, it's just going to get absolutely annihilated. Most splash troops against just big troops like Pekka's are just going to not do very well.
No, it's you know, it can withstand one blow with a shield or whatever, but after that, it's kind of toast against the Pekka. But anyway, that's not the point of this video. So I have so many questions. What I really want to do today is I want to focus on, because at least in my experience, I told you this before we started recording, but in my experience, there's three types of HOG players. People who aren't that good at HOG play. People who are pretty good, you know, like I would put myself in this category, like pretty good, pretty comfortable with HOG decks. And then there's like another level of HOG players, I feel. People who can just rattle off win after win after win against really solid players. And I really want to try to uncover the secrets, the tricks, the tips, whatever you want to call it, the strategy essentially, that separates those players at that high level like you're in from guys like me, right? So, you know, I know it's a very vague question, but maybe you can pinpoint, like, you've seen a lot of players play HOG, good players and bad players. Do you think there's one aspect in particular, maybe it's like prediction plays, maybe it's something else, that separates those really good players from the average players?
Well, prediction plays play a part of it, of course, like with any deck, but I feel like a good solid HOG player doesn't need that kind of like fancy element. It's really just knowing when to attack, when to defend, like knowing how to use your cycle troops very well to get like a lot of value out of them. Because like most decks, like tank decks, whatever, if you really just cycle skeletons, it's not going to mean a big deal. But if you're playing a deck like 2.6 or this deck where you're just cycling bats, like playing a bad bats could mean the difference between like a win and a loss. So really just knowing those micro interactions and just like not wasting any of the materials you have.
Okay, that's really good advice. I want to kind of delve deeper into that and talk about those micro transactions, right? Like with a deck like this, it seems like on the surface, it's maybe a little bit of a more complicated deck in terms of there's a lot of moving parts, I feel like, you know, as opposed to like a 2.6 HOG cycle. I mean, every card has a really specific purpose, I feel like, in a deck like that. Can you talk a little bit about, maybe it is bats, like what do you feel the most important cards to make sure you're playing at the right time, regardless of cost? Obviously, Pekka is a huge one.
Yeah.
But, you know, what are some good opportunities, or maybe it might be a better way to explain it is, what are some mistakes that people make on those little microtransactions?
I feel like the biggest mistakes people make is like just cycling cards. That could be very useful. Like let's say I was just in a game against Three Musk and I almost lost because I cycled an Ewiz and then he had Minion Horde Battle Ram in the other lane and I only had like Ice Golem Bats to counter it. So it's really just knowing what cards to save and like let's say they have a Battle Ram, right? Like keeping those goblins in your cycle, like not using them offensively, maybe going for bats offensively instead or something like that.
Okay, so you're identifying what your opponent is playing, both on offense and what maybe like what their best counters to your hog is, and then trying to work around that.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So any other? How about Pekka? Let's talk about Pekka, right? Because I have so many questions. I feel about the Pekka card. Well, you know, before we get to Pekka, Ewiz. Ewiz is a really strong card, obviously, even with that small HP reduction and the last balance changes. What would you recommend if people don't have Ewiz to get kind of the same feel of the deck? What would you sub in for Ewiz?
Probably Musketeer or Minions. Both are pretty good. Air troops do a lot of damage and are pair well with things like Ice Golem and Bats, but probably Musketeer.
If you were on ladder and you did have Ewiz, but say he was only like level 1 or maybe level 2 if you're a little bit higher up, essentially an under-leveled Ewiz, would you prefer an over-leveled or an at-level Musketeer on ladder, or would you prefer an under-leveled Ewiz?
Honestly, it's really just personal preference. Like I've practiced a lot with this deck. Like in the 21 challenge, I played it a lot. So, when I was going to ladder with it, I preferred the level 4 Ewiz over a maxed Musketeer. For me, with almost all maxed cards. But it's really just personal preference at that point. Like they're both very viable options.
Okay. Okay. So now let's get to the Pekka. So the Pekka is a beast in this deck. Talk about Pekka usage. When and where are you playing here? I mean, the obvious one is against a tank. Everybody knows that, right? But beyond that, I mean, if you know your opponent has a golem or something, you're holding the Pekka for when they play it. What about every other circumstance? Talk a little bit about the Pekka.
Well, the Pekka's really main use in this deck is like you don't want to cycle those cards that you want to use on offense, like Ice Golem to defend something like a Bandit. And if you can get great value out of a Pekka, like let's say with an Inferno Tower, right? You play it against the Golem, it gets really good value. If it could also hit like a Bandit or something, that's really good value, right? It's the same kind of playstyle with the Pekka. Let's say they have like a Knight, Bandit, and Miner push coming down the lane. If you can play your Pekka to just stop all that, it's really just about getting value and really just shutting down their pushes, while you can also focus to the other lane with something like a Hog Ice Golem.
That's a great point. I was going to be my next question about focusing other lane. I actually saw Chief Pat playing this deck last night on Twitch, going for his 20-win challenge. Like me, he was stymied once he got to higher, you know, I think I went to 17-3 a few times. Pat, I think, maybe got up to 18. But either way, you know, us YouTube noobs, we couldn't get it done like you, man. But he was actually playing this deck. He was doing really well with it. So, you know, Pat's obviously a really good player. But I noticed two situations that he got into a lot. One is he often went hog opposite lane, and I found myself watching Pat, and I was thinking, man, he really has a good wherewithal of when to hit opposite lane and when not to. So maybe you can kind of enlighten our viewers even more in that, as far as that goes. Like, say you drop your Pekka to stop like a Bandit Battle Ram, like you said, in one lane. What would be the, you have two options, right? You want to play your Hog next because you just stopped for a good elixir trade or whatever from your opponent. What would stop you from playing the Hog behind the Pekka as a tank versus playing the Hog in the opposite lane, like you said, with the Ice Golem or something? Is it about having that double pressure? Or when is the situation call for going all out in one lane?
Well, honestly, well, of course, if you have like 10, 15, 20 seconds left, both towers are pretty even, you're going to go on the same lane as a Pekka, right? That's pretty common sense. But it's really just about what archetype you're playing against. Like, let's say you're playing against like a giant bull or lightning or something of that sorts. You have the Pekka, it's going to stop their push. I'd really prefer to go opposite lane there because let's say they're about to play a giant push and you have to hog to get some chip damage, you really don't want to be feeding into that counter push. I know you have Pekka to counter their giant, whatever, it's a great counter, but even still, you really just want to minimize their pushes as much as you can when you're playing hog, because aside from Pekka, you really don't have much to stop those major pushes. But against things like Lava Loon, where you don't really have many counters, and it's good to be able to tank with their minions with a Pekka or something like Hog, where it's really not going to be that big of a push. you really do want to go same lane and just apply as much pressure as you can while they're either low on elixir or don't have much to defend.
Okay, did I hear that right? That against Lava Loon, you go same lane with Pekka?
Yeah.
Okay, so when they drop their Lava Loon with this deck, you drop your Pekka same lane in the back?
Pretty much. I mean, sometimes it's not the best play to drop Pekka. What I'd rather do there is, like, say, drop Ewiz and Bats, and then try to go in with a Hog push, and then try to cycle back to another set of Bats. So hopefully I can take out their Balloon as quickly as possible after they say Zap or Arrow my Bats or Lightning my Ewiz. But that's a pretty hard matchup, and against that, you really just want to apply as much pressure as you can.
Okay, so what would stop you from say, okay, they dropped their Lava Hound in the back. Unfortunately, Lava Hound was one of the replays we just didn't have in your arsenal, so we're just going to have to talk about it. But I think this is good because it applies to a lot of situations that you could run into. So if they drop their Lava Hound in the back, is your first move going to be immediate Hog in the opposite lane or the same lane?
If they just drop it in the back, probably opposite lane. Just because you don't want to be feeding into that counter push. But let's say I already have a Pekka going down the lane, and then they Lava Hound. That's when you want to go same lane.
Okay. What about Pekka versus Pekka? Because let's face it, Pekka is so popular right now in the game, and that was actually the other scenario that I saw Pat run into a lot, is he was playing other decks, either this similar mirror match, or decks with Pekka included in the deck. So what would you do? Are you saving your Pekka for your opponent's Pekka? Or how does that work?
Well, most of the time, in those matchups, it's really just, seeing what spells they have. Do they have Fireball Zap? Do they have Lightning Log? Do they have Lightning Zap? And, like, saying, okay, if they have Zap, I'm going to use Goblins instead of Bats to counter their Hog, whatever. But also with that matchup, it's really important to, like, fight on your side of the map when the Pekka fight. The Pekka fight is probably one of the most important things, because especially if it's, like, an opposite lane match, where, like, most Hog games are, you really want to be winning that Pekka matchup on your side of the map so you can get the biggest counter push of the game and hopefully get some lightning value against the Ewiz, and they just really can't defend.
So always drop your Pekka after your opponent.
Unless you have to stop a Hog like 100% and you know that a Pekka swing can kill it, you really don't want to be the first one to play that Pekka.
Okay, so what about this scenario? Your Pekka goes head-to-head with your... Okay, let's not even go head-to-head with another Pekka. Let's just say a random scenario where your Pekka has just defended against, say, a Hog in one lane. And then your Pekka starts walking up to the bridge. Are you going to support your Pekka? Or are you going to just let it kind of just see what happens?
Probably support my Pekka if it's something like double elixir, but really you don't want to be overcommitting too much. But yeah, that's a bit of a weird scenario.
Yeah, because I saw Pat get into that a lot, and oftentimes he would like play an Ewiz or Bats behind the Pekka to try to get a little something going.
Yeah.
And or even Lightning, and that's one thing we haven't talked about in this deck. So let's kind of move onto that. When are you using Lightning? When are you using Hog Lightning? Anytime that gives you value, or talk about Lightning. When are you using it, and when aren't you using it?
Well, let's say like I have a Pekka going down the lane, like you said, and maybe like an Ewiz behind it and they play an Inferno. I normally wouldn't Lightning that. I feel like it's the same kind of scenario with Golem, right? If it's like single elixir, you only have a Golem down, they're gonna play an Inferno. You're not likely to Lightning that unless it's like double elixir or something, or you need the damage. But where I do typically Lightning is when it's like 30, 60 seconds left. They have like an Ewiz, a Knight, and a Tower, or like a Bandit Ewiz, or like Inferno Tower Knight, something like Log Bait, and you're really trying to get that maybe not really prediction Lightning, but you want to be aware of their cycle, like have Lightning ready for their Infernos or whatever they're going to defend, and just hope to get that 1 or extra 2 Hog hits in and that Lightning chip damage. Or you really want to go with like value, like maybe hitting 2 Musketeers in a tower if you know you can defend the other lane or something like that.
A couple follow-up questions on Lightning. Number one is, if your opponent starts out with a pump in front of their King Tower or wherever it is, and you have Lightning in your opening hand, let's say you have Hog Lightning Pekka and I don't know, Bats. Mm-hmm. Are you gonna push with Hog, or are you going to Hog Lightning, or are you just gonna solo Lightning?
Typically, I like to push with Hog on the same lane. that the pump's closer to, and like let's say they play a knight or something else, then I'll lightning it. But if they don't play anything else, let's just say they play goblins or something, then I'll just let it go. And I'll normally try to maybe lightning the second pump or cycle back to another hog. Because normally with those matchups, right, they're either playing 3 Musk or some tank deck. Tank decks I'm not really too worried about, but let's say they're playing 3 Musk, then let's say they used goblins against my first hog, right? It's really important to get back to that second hog because they're either going to have minion horde, which is going to take a lot of damage to the ice golem, or you're going to have 3 Musk, which I can lightning. So
that's a really
different ways to play that, but yeah.
I like that. That's a really good point because it definitely kind of that's the mindset that you have, like the pros have, is that you're playing like 5 or 6 or 7 steps ahead of your opponent at times. So what's the most, how do you handle a bait matchup? Because bait decks seem to be everywhere right now in the meta.
This deck is actually very good against bait. Like you have that E-Wiz, which can kill like, let's say a knight and a goblin gang if you play it correctly with some bats, and then you have the log, which you'll always be able to have for the goblin barrel, or if you get like good like princess and log bait value. But really the best play, like why log bait can't beat this deck, if they're both like say playing equally or whatever, is they'll almost never be able to play their Inferno, as if they ever play your Inferno against your hog, you'll just be able to lightning that and get at least some good tower damage and probably a hog hit or two, even if they play another goblin gang with that.
Okay, that's good advice, and I think that bait decks seem to be I think Lava Loon is like really the big challenging deck. Is there anything on the same level as Lava Loon in terms of difficult matchups for this deck?
Lava Loon is clearly the hardest matchup, but I'd also say pretty quick hog cycle decks, like maybe 2.6 or something like that. I do struggle a little bit against that because they can really outcycle your P.E.K.K.A. and just apply a lot more pressure on you than you can on them, and you can't really get value lightnings and stuff like that. But you definitely can win that matchup. Lava Loon is really, really the kicker here.
Okay. Well, before we let you go, we ought to talk about the win condition, the hog. We haven't really talked about him too much. You know, obviously, I mean, what is there to say about a hog rider, right?
Yeah.
It's pretty basic. But at the same time, I want to know a little bit. It's not a hog cycle deck, per se. So let's start out with the beginning of the match. Are you opening your like, let's say your opponent was waiting you out here. Will you ever open up the match as the very first play in the match with a hog?
Well, it really just depends on your playstyle. Like, if you're trying to play this more as a P.E.K.K.A. control deck, as some people are, then you won't start with that hog. But a lot of times I really do play this just like a hog cycle, hog lightning deck, and then just save that P.E.K.K.A. for when I need it. So I do tend to like just playing naked hogs in the beginning and just seeing how they go and trying to put pressure on them.
Okay, so let's say you start out with a naked hog, and then and then your opponent drops like an E-Wiz. Would you use lightning in that scenario, or is that just not enough value or too early in the match?
Probably not. I feel like that's overcommitting because E-Wiz is common in a lot of decks, right? Let's say I hog, they E-Wiz, I lightning it, and then they just giant Mega Minion at the bridge, and I have almost no elixir, maybe 2 or 3 elixir to defend that. That just doesn't seem... That seems a little bit aggressive.
Yeah, it's a little bit too risky. I think that's another good example for folks out there to kind of see the difference between, trying to think a little bit ahead. Like, will that leave me with too little elixir? But going into double elixir time, in that scenario, you would use lightning, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, typically, because they're probably not just gonna play an E-Wiz, maybe an E-Wiz and an Ice Spirit, or E-Wiz and Goblins or something, which is not bad value at all. And especially in double elixir, you're gonna have enough elixir to get a P.E.K.K.A. Especially at that point, you know what archetype they're playing most of the time. So yeah.
And what about just hog cycling in general? Is there? I mean, this deck is obviously not a super cheap deck for a hog deck, 3.6.
Yeah.
But if you want to, like, let's say you can beat your opponent's counter with this deck, is there and totally feel free to be like, shut up, man, if I'm talking nonsense here. But is there something to being said that, like, you can make this deck cycle a little bit faster by kind of playing your cards correctly? In other words, like playing purposely your bats and your goblins or your ice golem in between the hogs just to cycle to that hog faster? Or is that not something you'd recommend?
Yeah, you can do that. Like, if it means, a lot of what pro players do sometimes is play like a hog ice golem at the bridge, and then they'll play bats in the back, like immediately after already gearing up for the next hog push, which is really, not a bad play at all, especially if you need to get that chip damage last second. So it's really, yeah, you can really just play this like any normal hog cycle deck if that's what the matchup needs.
Awesome, man. Well, you know, I feel like I have a really good understanding of the deck now. I just want to thank you again for coming on, man. Glad you're feeling better. Can't wait to see you streaming again. Any parting words, shout outs, any of that good stuff, Hazard?
Not really. Shout out to all my friends in like the Check It Discord and the Silent Discord, always practicing and stuff. I don't know. That's really
man.
it.
Hey, that's good enough, dude. Thanks again for coming on. Really enjoy the deck, and wishing all my viewers out there good luck with the deck as well. So thanks again, man.
All right, no problem.
All right, guys, that is going to do it for today's video. Special shout out to Hazard again for coming on. Always enjoy when he comes on the channel. Definitely a pro player in the game right now. Another huge shout out to Bren Chong, my YouTube partner. Make sure you check him out in the description below. Guys, thanks so much for watching. And as always, take care, guys.